Good evening, folks, and welcome to the live stream. I hope you're all very well this evening. Let's see who we have on tonight. We have Joe Cake, great to see you. The Cave, great to have you on. Colin, great to see you once again. We have Quartermaster Reviews, great to see you. Raven 1983 Witch, great to see you too. We also have CGM moderating, thanks so much CGM. Political X, great to see you, hope you're well. We have Chatty Rat, great to see you Chatty Rat. John O'Sullivan is on, great to see you John. Derek R, great to see you too, once again. FSM is the dog, great to see you. The Freckle Punny, great to have you on too. We also have Nico, great to see you Nico. Ronnie, great to have you on. Hope you're well. Oraman, Lenen, great to see you. We also have Bernie, great to see you Bernie. Who else have we got tonight? We have Roisin, great to see you Roisin. Kevin Marsh is on. Casper. We also have Suzanne, great to see you. Wolfpet, great to see you too. Who else have we got? Chris, Alistair, great to see you. Asperger's Europe, great to have you on. Stu, great to see you too. Hope you're well. Regan Elite is on. We have Ends of the God. We have Mark and so many more. I want to say welcome to everyone who's on. I can't say hello to everyone personally, unfortunately. Hope you had a great week and a great weekend. And we have 145 viewings, so remember to smash that like button, guys. And on the Sunday roast, there is a special Sunday Christmas themed Sunday roast coming up. I better not give you too much information about that, but it will be very interesting. So keep an eye on the Sunday roast channel for a notification about what's going to pop up about that. Tonight we're going to talk here on the stream about Rishi Sunak and the Tories, whether they're losing support of the public over the strikes, some of the other details related to that, and some other weird news. We start off here with Rishi Sunak refuses to budge on NHS pay as strikes continue. I think at the end of this he will eventually change, because there's pressure within the Conservative Party also to bend on this, because the support, the nurses have the support of the public at the moment, and it's not like the miners' strike back in the 1980s. The public are going through the cost of living crisis as well. So they know exactly why the nurses are on strike, and they understand, from the likes of other trade union bosses, such as Mick Lynch, and for example, for the nurses, Paula Cullen, is it, who are presenting to the public exactly why they're on strike, the problems that they, for example, in this case, the NHS is going through. The problems not just related to money, but the retainment of staff, which is, of course, paramount in nursing. If you can't hold on to your staff, then you're in serious trouble. And how over the last number of years, these 12 years of Tory government, the funding hasn't been there for the NHS. So it's had to cut back. It's had to try and fill the gap in its staff with agency people, or it's tried to bring people back in. It's struggling to, Pat Cullen, not Paula Cullen, Pat Cullen. Thanks for that correction, Richard Turner. It's important that the NHS is actually able to access the staff it needs. Otherwise, it will collapse. It goes on to say Rishi Sunak has refused to budge on NHS pay, saying the rises could make soaring inflation worse. There's no evidence to back that up, as he comes under growing pressure to negotiate with striking health workers. Look, from a political point of view, I think this would actually benefit him to negotiate with the nurses. If we look at what happened in Scotland, First Minister Nicola Sturgeon sat down with the nurses and they agreed a deal. Now, they have to ballot on it, and it's not guaranteed that there won't be strikes later on, but at least the strikes have been taken off the table for the time being. If Rishi Sunak did something like that, yes, it would upset some people within the Conservative Party, but I think it would actually boost his ratings. Really don't know why he's not doing that. I understand it's about fighting with the nurses, but this is not, as I said, it's not the same as the 1980s, where Thatcher was trying to face down the miners. It's a very different situation today. However, in his first appearance at the powerful Commons Liaison Committee, he did not rule out the government rewriting the pay review body's remit for the next year, meaning NHS workers could get a bigger reward in future. There will be a body and a process for next year. The door is always open to talk to anyone to be constructive about how we approach these things in the future. It came as last-minute talks between the Health Secretary Steve Barclay and the health unions broke down without any resolution, with Unite saying that the negotiations had been pointless as the Tory politician had refused to discuss pay. And here we have a calendar of upcoming strikes. You can see every day there is some sort of industrial action taking place, be it in the NHS or in the civil service, or in energy, or in the transport as well. Thousands of ambulance workers, including paramedics and call handlers, will strike on Wednesday in England and Wales over pay, following a second day of nurses' strikes. NHS leaders have warned that they are unable to keep patients safe during industrial action. And we've heard this before. The problem is that if they don't go on strike, nothing will change. Ambulance staff are already at breaking point. And NHS nurses are beyond breaking point. And they feel that the only way out of this is to put pressure on the government to change their approach to this. Max, the inflation wage spiral is just Tory lies. Thanks to, and I agree 100%. If inflation was at 10% without any pay increases, then it's not going to increase. And look, one thing is about paying people more if they go out and spend it in the economy, but they're not actually going to spend it in the economy. They're not going to be propping up industries. They're going to be just paying their bills. It's a bit like furlough. Did furlough cause inflation? No, because people were using the money to just get by. Also, businesses were closed during furlough, but ordinary people don't hoard money. They don't buy assets. They spend it just to get by, especially during a cost of living crisis. It's not going to feed into inflation. There's no evidence to support that. Thanks once again, Stu. The Prime Minister told MPs at the committee at his final parliamentary appearance before the Christmas recess that he was standing by the recommendation of the pay review bodies, which he has said had taken into account forward estimates of inflation. The estimates that they made were back in June or July, when inflation was about 4 or 5%. He told the public sector workers considering strike action this Christmas, "I've acknowledged that it's difficult." Yeah, it's difficult for everybody, apart from him and his wife, because inflation is where it is. And the best way to help them and help everyone else in the country is for us to get a grip and reduce inflation as quickly as possible. Then why did you transfer money to the richest in society? Why not take some money off the richest in society? That would actually help deal with inflation. Because if the people who are responsible for inflation, the richest in society, by buying assets and driving up the price, and also some of the causes of inflation are nothing to do with what's happening in the UK. They're international, as we're constantly being told. So if it's an international problem, then how would giving nurses enough to get by drive up inflation any further? I don't want to say that. I don't want to see that. I want to see things get back to normal, and that's why having an independent pay process is an important part of us making those decisions and getting them correct. Elsewhere in the session, Sunak repeatedly refused to comment on the speculation that he plans to remove the UK from the European Convention on Human Rights so as to avoid legal challenges to his stated plan to stop refugees who arrive in the UK via unofficial means from being allowed to stay irrespective of their circumstances. Once again, I think this is just rhetoric about, withdrawing the UK from the European Convention on Human Rights. There are problems with removing the UK from the European Convention on Human Rights. For example, the Good Friday Agreement relies on the Human Rights Act. If that was removed, then it would put the Good Friday Agreement in jeopardy. And I don't think the UK government want to do that. There'd be sanctions from the US if they did something like that, and from the EU. Quizzed about the wider plan to limit the number of asylum seekers crossing the channel in small boats set out a week ago, Sunak reiterated his pledge to clear the backlog of asylum seekers by the end of next year, related only to the figure of 92,000 that existed in June, not the current of more than 143,000. I still don't understand how he's going to clear the backlog by next June. I think this is a lie. I think this is just a promise that maybe he won't even be around. He'll be replaced, so he can make whatever promises he wants. But they're not going to clear the backlog by next June. They don't have the staff available. They're not willing to invest the resources necessary to clear the backlog. This is a backlog that has built up over 12 years, and he's talking about clearing it in 6 or 7 months. It's pie in the sky. It could potentially do it, but they would have to throw massive amounts of resources at it, but they're not planning to do that. They're talking about hiring 400 extra staff, but that's not going to clear the backlog. Anyway, let me read some of your comments, guys. Poor MPs aren't paid enough. Just 82,000 or 84,000 pounds a year. Magic, thanks so much for that super chat. They have to stop calling things that are guided or appointed by the government as independent, like independent Sue Gray or independent pay review. Yes, Sue Gray was appointed by the Prime Minister. Sue Gray was only able to say what the Prime Minister allowed her to say. That's not independent. In the same way, this independent pay review body is appointed by the government, appointed by MPs. And they're not allowed to say whatever they want. They're not allowed to work within. They have to also take into consideration, efficiency or something like that. Whatever that means. We generally have an idea of efficiency, but when the politicians are talking about efficiency, it's about cutting back. So it's not always the case that it's, as Majik said here, it's not always the case that when it's called independent, it's actually independent. And well brought up there, the idea of Sue Gray. We remember, we have to wait for Sue Gray's independent report. Independent Sue Gray. Yeah. Alistair, thanks so much for that super chat. Chat, you all have a great holiday Christmas. Thank you so much, Alistair. And thanks for that early wish and greeting. It's very kind of you. Thanks so much. Anyway, moving on to some of the news from today. Thousands of nurses have been on strike in England, England, Wales and Northern Ireland, and an ambulance strike in England and Wales is set to go ahead tomorrow after Steve Barclay, the Health Secretary, concluded talks with the trade union without opening new talks on pay. They continue to refuse to talk about pay. Once again, I think it's down to this attempt to break the nurses' strike. Because one of the most important aspects of this strike is pay. Not just to allow nurses to be able to feed themselves and keep their homes warm, but to retain staff. And I'm sure that the government are happy to allow the NHS to crumble so that the private sector can step in and go, oh, we can do all of this. There's no need to have an NHS. The private sector will do it, of course, at a cost. Members of the public have been urged to avoid getting drunk or taking part in risky activities on Wednesday because strike hit NHS ambulance services will not be able to treat them. You know, it's a good idea not to get involved in risky activities anyway, but you know, this is pretty damning, pretty concerning. Of course, we have to understand why these ambulance staff are going on strike, because they are overstretched. They're being forced into positions that they didn't sign up to. And as we've heard before, if you have fewer and fewer staff, the workload will just be offloaded onto those fewer staff. Train drivers have called a fresh 24-hour strike on the 5th of January in the long-running dispute over pay and conditions on UK railways, and the Labour former Cabinet Minister Douglas Alexander is understood to be trying to stand again as an MP at the next election in the latest sign of Labour's big beasts returning to frontline politics. Not familiar with Douglas Alexander, I should look him up. Risky activities like voting Tory, that's pretty risky. Break the unions next. Up will be everyone else. We have to stand by the strikers. Well said, Mark. Risky activities like being an MP. I hear one of the independent pay reviewers works for McCain. What have oven chips got to do with nurses' pay? Really? David McGuinness is on the stream. Great to see you, David. And Conservator as well. Good to have you on too. Can't pay the bill, son. Collapse some pictures in the window, Steve. It's that's what the nurses should turn up. Can't pay my mortgage. Sorry. Will collapse do? Oh my goodness. So this is a video from Sky News about the situation for ambulance staff. And look, as you can see, that's not a typical ambulance driver. That's a soldier.
They are willing. They are able.
Find you a mat bundle, you'll find your blankets.
But the military can't fully replicate the work of the ambulance staff, who are the next to walk out in England and Wales.
So this top button will be deploying, all right? So just be aware.
The plea from the NHS to the public is simple. Don't add to our burden.
Emergency ambulance, the patient.
Just think about it for a moment, okay? How long does it take to train up to be a paramedic? How long does it take to train to drive an ambulance? Because driving an ambulance is not like driving a car, okay? How long does it take to train up to do these things? Well, it seems that, you know, the army is not trained to do these things. The army is trained to do other things. And this is the Tory response to everything. Oh, just bring in the army. During the pandemic, bring in the army. And the army are useful in a very limited way. But you can't have them doing these things. And there was also news that ambulance drivers, military who are driving these ambulances, won't be able to break red lights because that'll be breaking the law. If you're not qualified as a ambulance driver, they're not qualified because they can't be qualified because there's no time to train them and get them certified. So they can't break the law. So if there's an emergency, they have to respect the rules of the road like everyone else. And what if somebody is injured in this? Who is responsible? Is it the NHS? Is it the military, the Department of Defence? Like, if a soldier doesn't resuscitate somebody correctly and they die, or if a soldier, I don't know, hits somebody with the ambulance because they're not trained to drive it correctly, who is responsible there? I don't know if somebody in the chat can answer that question. It'd be great to know. Heard they had 3-hour training max. Thanks, Alistair. 3 hours training to be an ambulance driver? Regularly, this is so stupid. This can all be avoided. It can be avoided, but the government have decided we're not going to actually sit down and talk about pay because we need to appear tough. we need to keep the backbenchers on board. Thanks, Reagan and Lead. Army ambulance drivers, an accident in waiting. No fault of the poorly ordered squaddy. No, this is not. I have nothing against the soldiers. They've been, they're there to serve, and they've been told now you have to serve in this way, and they're doing their job. They're not complaining. They're not allowed to complain, but they want to do the best they can. Their commander says you have to do X, and they go and do X. Doesn't matter what X is. It could be attacking a hill, or it could be driving an ambulance. And today it's an ambulance, so they will try and do it to the best of their ability. But they're not trained to do this. It's like taking a sailor and putting them, on the land, or vice versa. They're not trained to do that. And there is a risk that they will make mistakes, and people will suffer. But once again, as was said, this is not their fault. It's the fault of the government, because the government have decided not to enter talks on pay. Yep, Max, they cannot do blue lights, not as not trained to. Yeah, so they can't put on the siren and break red lights. They have to respect the rules of the road. Now, in most cases, that's not probably a problem, because but if it's a serious situation, it could be the difference between life and death, because somebody needs to get to the hospital as soon as possible, and if the ambulance driver has to stop at the traffic light or respect the rules of the road like everyone else, it could be the difference between life and death. And if, once again, the Tories just don't care. Rishi Sunak doesn't care. Steve Barclay doesn't care.
Breathe in.
Tomorrow is not a day to have an accident or to need urgent care.
If you think you have an emergency which isn't life-threatening, then start by using 111 online. If that doesn't give you the answer you require, then please phone 111. And if you think you need to go to hospital, then perhaps it would be a good idea this evening to ask a friend or a relative whether they would be able to take you to hospital should the need arise tomorrow.
Did anyone ever think it would get to this stage where the head of the ambulance service would be telling people to try and go to hospital without using an ambulance? And once again, this is by design. This is the Tories making a decision to fight this out with the nurses. It's not necessary. It's not necessary to require to get into this fight with ambulance staff or nurses or anyone else. But this is a conscious decision taken by the Tory party.
The system is already straining. The queues in Stevenage are replicated already in so many hospitals around the country. There is a real nervousness within the health service as to how this plays out, just how many people will be left without the care that they need. It is an intensely difficult moment for the NHS, just at the point when they need their staff the most. Before their strike, paramedics in Yorkshire supported the nurses who were back out for a second time. At Leeds General Infirmary, this was the Christmas get-together nobody wanted.
How much appetite do you have for doing this again in January, February?
Absolutely, all the way. Absolutely, we've got to.
The Royal College of Nursing say they have to be paid better. The Westminster government say they can't pay better.
No, because we spent all that money on corruption. We can't pay you anymore because we have no money left. Why have we no money left? Because we paid it out to, people in the House of Lords who won dodgy contracts, or we gave a load of money to people who on the furlough scheme who didn't actually need it, and it was fraud. And we could have tried to claw some of that money back, but we decided just to write it off. But we purchased loads of PPE that was not fit for use. And we decided now we have to store it at £100,000 a day, or we have to burn it. FSM, thanks so much for that super chat. People are already driving due to Tory cutbacks. Oh my God. And yeah, this is another thing is if there's a strike on for rail, it means more people will use their cars. If more people are on the road who maybe not are used to driving as much as they would normally, there's a higher risk of accidents, meaning a higher risk of a requirement of NHS staff. The Tories love playing the blame game. They're hoping people will die, then blame the ambulance drivers. Yeah, I imagine that's the case.
I believe now it's incumbent on the Prime Minister on the eve of Christmas to get behind these nursing staff and patients and do the decent thing, get into a room and start to talk to me.
Thank you. If I can introduce you to the care home manager, if I may.
The Health Secretary insists he wants to do it.
We're keen to talk, we're engaging with the trade unions. On pay, we have an independent process and we...
It's not enough. Like, there's no point saying, yeah, we have this independent, but if the independent body is saying we're going to give you 3% and there's a cost of living crisis which sees inflation running at over 10%, and the nurses say that's not good enough, then what's the point in continuing to bang on about this bloody independent pay body? Makes no sense, unless you want just to shift the blame onto somebody else. Oh, it's not our fault, it's the independent pay body's fault. FSM, thanks so much for that super chat. We have another from Freckle Punny, thank you so much. I'm Jeremy Clarkson and I need emergency anger management. Bloody effing strikes, grr. Wipes froth away from Matt. He's probably angry about a lot of things this week, and what a piece of work. I was going to say something much worse there. Jeremy Clarkson, a horrible individual. I never liked the guy. Honestly, you know, when I saw him in Top Gear, I always thought he was an arrogant piece of crap, and it wasn't just for show. It wasn't just like I'm going to be, appear arrogant as part of my character or something like that. No, it's him to a T, and he's a horrible individual. And the stuff that he came out this week, obviously, sick. He was even condemned by his own daughter. Of course, he was defended by, who would you normally think would defend him? The racists and bigots defended him. If you're being defended by racists and bigots, it's concerning. Okay. Thanks for that super chat. We have also Alistair once again. Thank you so much, Alistair. Max, I remember the fire brigade strike. The police had to escort the Green Army fire engines on a call out. Maybe they'll do the same again for this. I wouldn't be surprised. But the problem for the army at the moment is they're short-staffed. There was a stage where they were driving HGV trucks. Remember at the beginning of Brexit. It's like we don't have enough drivers. Get the army in to sort that out. But this is a very different situation. And you can't there aren't enough soldiers in the country to do all the work. Excuse me. Maybe that's what the Tories would prefer. Just let the workers go on strike and we get the army to do everything. The army to work in your local Tesco, the army to be a nurse, the army to be doctors, the army to be train drivers, to be ticket collectors, everything. Just get them to do everything. Civil servants, replace the civil servants with the army. It'd be like some sort of a dictatorship, where you have everyone dressed in a military uniform. Maybe some people like Nigel Farage or whatever would definitely like to see something like that. Might remind him of the good old days. Brad, thanks so much for that super chat. I don't stand with Clarkson, or I get punched. He's a piece of work, isn't he? Thanks, Brad.
Have accepted that in full, and of course that comes on top of the extra prioritisation of the NHS last year. But we also, alongside that, need to focus on patients. I'd rather look...
You don't care about patients. If you cared about patients, you would make sure that the patients were looked after, that the nurses would be treated with respect. They would have the money they need. They would have the resources they need. They wouldn't be seeing more and more nurses leaving the profession and seeing their workload increase. You wouldn't have thought it acceptable for nurses to go home tired, destroyed, and then having to rely on frigging food banks.
Forward and back, and we're already now into the negotiations around next year's pay review body. That starts from April. We've already submitted the letter in terms of that, so that process is already underway.
I'm telling you why Barclay isn't coming to talk.
They all know that this is unsustainable. It really can't go on. But without a compromise, it will.
Well said. Joe Cake says, Max, nurses here go home crying because they see they entered a profession to help people, and they see that they're not able to help people, that they're overworked, and that they're not able to do the job that they want to do. Many have been willing to stick it out for as long as, this is not something that's happened overnight. This has been going on for 12 years. Cutbacks for the NHS, more and more workers and nurses leaving to find something better, and that means that those who remain have more work to do. And they want to help their patients, but they see that if they can't, they need to do something. Robin, thanks so much for that super chat. There's a shortage of 47,000 nurses. There's only 85,000 soldiers. Without these strikes, it would take over half the entire army to fill the shortfall. And, you can't have the army doing everything. And if there are more and more people going on strike from different sectors, as I said, the army can't fill that. But where is the plan to reduce that shortage? Well, they said we need to have more draconian measures when it comes to immigration, so we can't allow the NHS to bring in the nurses it needs from abroad. We don't want that. Or whatever they do want to bring in is more difficult. It's not impossible, but it's more difficult. So you have backlogs, you have a shortage. And the response from government is, we're not going to pay you anymore, and we're going to make it difficult for the NHS to get the staff it needs. I wonder how many MPs could put a number on the strength of the British Army with anything like accuracy. Probably very few. There's probably one or two, but no one in government, I would imagine. Aslav announced strike by train drivers on Thursday, the 5th of January. So we talked a little bit about this already. The strike will affect 15 rail companies: Avanti West Coast, Chiltern Railways, Cross Country, East Midland Railways, Great Western Railway, Greater Anglia, GTR, Great Northern Thameslink, London North Eastern Railway, Northern Trains, Southeastern, Southern Gatwick Express, Southwestern Railways, Depot Drivers Only, SWR Island Line, TransPennine Express, and West Midlands Trains. Mick Whelan, who is the representative, said, "We don't want to go on strike, but the companies have pushed us into this place. They have not offered our members at these companies a penny. And there are people who have not had an increase since April 2019. Inflation has been reasonably low until this year, but these workers still didn't get a pay rise. They didn't get one in latter part of 2019, 2020, 2021, and we're almost at the end of 2022. That means that they expect train drivers at these companies to take real terms pay cut to work just as hard for considerably less. With inflation, inflation is running at north of 14%. Yes, what he's talking here about is when it comes to food and energy. The train companies say their hands have been tied by the government, while the government, which does not employ us, says it's up to the companies to negotiate with us. We are always happy to negotiate. We never refuse to sit down at the table and talk, but these companies have offered us nothing, and that is unacceptable. And he's correct. And of course, what the government are doing here is saying, oh, it's nothing to do with us, a bit like the independent pay body when it comes to nurses. But when it comes to rail staff, it's nothing to do with us. It's between the railway companies and the workers. But the railway companies are told, what they can do from the government. So they're not allowed to make decisions without the minister signing off on it, in a sense. But the minister is not signing off on it. As we saw with Mick Lynch was planning to have a meeting with a few weeks ago with the head of one of the train operators, and an hour before the meeting was due to take place, the train company told him it was cancelled, and Mick found out that it was because of the government. The government decided to add another measure that would scuttle the talks. This was driver-only trains, which they knew was unacceptable to the RMT. And that was the result of it. The government didn't want an agreement because they want to extend these. They want this saga to continue because they want the public to turn against the unions. Because the government are compensating the train companies. So the train companies are not really in a position to go, okay, we need to operate because the government is paying them off. And the government wants this fight to continue. When they talk about, we don't have money for nurses. Yeah, but you have money to give to these train operators. Why are you doing that? Robin, thanks so much for that super chat. People aren't talking about the ableism of shutting ticket offices. Those who need support won't be able to get any. Only the most able can travel. This is a very valid point, that if the train operators shut down these ticket offices, many disabled people won't be able to travel. But it's all about cutting costs. It's all about saving money, because we need to this is the company's position. We need to maximize profit so we can give it to our shareholders. But as I said before, if it was nationalized, there'd be no profit incentive. So they would say, well, there's no need to cut back on support for disabled people. We can provide support for them that will provide what they need because it's not profit driven. Some aspects of the economy, it makes sense to be profit driven. Smartphones, okay. You want your smartphones made by private companies. But when it comes to important infrastructure, health, education, these need to be in the hands of the public, of the state, not private companies, because you don't want it profit driven. Thanks for that, Robin. Well, very valid point there. Let's move on. Let me see. So are the public turning against the Tories, or are they turning against the workers? It says here 2/3 of Britons support nurses' strike. Poll suggests. YouGov has released new polling suggesting that 2/3 of Britons support the strike by nurses. Support for striking ambulance staff is almost as high. RMT rail strike is the dispute with the most public opposition, 49%, but even here opinion is broadly mixed, with some 43% support the RMT action. There is a risk that the longer this goes on, and this is what the Tories are hoping for, that the longer this goes on, the smaller the support becomes, the less and less support becomes. But you can't have an NHS without nurses. It will collapse. And if it collapses, there's no point blaming the nurses. The government will get the blame. Because the nurses are saying, well, yeah, we want to negotiate on pay, but the government don't want to. You can see here with this graph, strongly support, somewhat support, don't know, somewhat oppose, strongly oppose. You know, who are these 17%? Are they the Daily Mail readers? The Express readers? When it comes to nurses? The RMT, 29%. They're probably people who watch Gammon Brexit news. Driving examiners, you know, there's not a huge amount of support for them, unfortunately. They're important for the state, important for society. If you don't have driving examiners, you won't have people passing their tests. David, thanks so much for that super chat. The magic money tree works for war and HS2, but not when it comes to paying public service workers. Yes. Or when it comes to the, you know, handing out money for PPE contracts or general corruption. Yeah, we have lots of money for that. But when it comes to paying public service workers, sorry, no, we need to be like a household. We also have I. Thank you so much. I or L. I'm not sure if it's a lowercase or an uppercase. Thank you so much for that super chat. Very kind of you. What are your thoughts on the discussion around increasing retirement age to fill needed vacancies? On a spiteful level, I think it's about time older people felt the pain they inflicted upon us by voting for Tories and Brexit. This is... there are two ways of looking at this. It's a very, very interesting point that you raise here, and thanks for the super chat. I think there are a lot of older people who have been working all their lives, maybe doing very difficult work, and they need to retire. They're not physically able to continue to work. I think it should be optional. Now about punishing people over Brexit, we're talking mainly middle class elderly people. So not all elderly people, not all boomers are to blame here. It's mainly middle class or upper. It's actually the richest, the well-to-do middle class people in the south of England are really the ones who got Brexit over the line. It's a myth about the working class who really got Brexit who won Brexit for the Brexiteers and Farage. It's mainly middle class elderly people in the south of England. So I don't agree with punishing the elderly because of a few of them were made a pretty dick move there. But it is an interesting thing. Should elderly people be allowed? You know, I think it should be optional. If some of them want to top up their pension, they don't feel it's enough, especially during a cost of living crisis. Some of them feel, look, maybe some people would like to work because they feel, put on the scrap heap. They feel put aside if they're not working. You know, if you've been working 8 hours a day for 30, 40 years, it's a big shift to not go to work. You know, the first few weeks may be lovely. Okay, I can do some tidying up around the house. I can work in my garden if I have one. I can see the kids. I can see the grandchildren. This is something that many elderly people want to do. But after a while, there's a real risk of depression because people feel, in a sense, useless. They don't feel as part. They don't feel that their days are fruitful. That they're not filling up their days with something valuable, and it's a real risk for many elderly people. So, but when it comes to filling job vacancies, if they have the skills, then I don't see the problem with them doing the jobs. Of course, some of the jobs elderly people wouldn't be physically able to do in many cases, or they wouldn't have the skills necessary. So it would be a requirement to train them up if they wanted. But I'm not against the idea of older people, working. I'm just against the idea of forcing them into it if they prefer not to be doing it. In the same way that, if there are people unemployed, I'm not a big fan of forcing people into employment because it doesn't end up very well. They don't stick with the job. It just creates animosity with the workers that they're with or with their boss, and it doesn't end very well. Thanks for that super chat. Very interesting question. All right. But we're not going to blame all boomers for Brexit. Alexis, once again, clap for strikers. Remember, guys, to every Thursday to clap for strikers. They need your support. And I think this is something that's really going to take off. Then email your MP and the Prime Minister telling them to get their finger out, stop moaning, sit down with the unions and pay the workers. And there needs to be, I think, a grassroots support. There needs to be grassroots support there. Getting more and more pressure on MPs. Especially, there are some MPs within the Conservative Party who are looking over their shoulder going, is it a good idea to be on the wrong side here? If we break the union, what do we get from that? Once again, this is not the 1980s. It's not you're going to replace the nursing staff with the private sector. You can't really do that. Thanks, Alexis, and remember, guys, to clap for strikers on Thursdays. Just like clap for carers during the pandemic. Currently, there's almost a 6-month waiting list, if you can get it over a year, to book a driving test. People are buying driving slots for a few hundred to £1,000. So people can't get. So they, what if your job requires you to drive, either to drive a vehicle as part of the job, or to actually, because you can't rely on public transport, if you need to drive to your place of work. If you need a test, that's a big problem. I hope they're not going to go the way of what happened in Ireland in the 1970s, where they just... How many tests have you done in the past? 3, and you failed all of them? Yeah. Well, you can probably drive. We'll give you a license. That's not going to end well. Okay, guys, we're about halfway through the stream, so I just want to take a short break, and we'll be back in just a moment following our funny video. Back with the serious stuff in just a second. Hope you enjoy this. As always, it's quite funny.
Colin from Portsmouth is on the line. Hello, Colin.
Why are good people being prejudiced against for speaking their opinion?
Will nobody think of the opinion spouters, Colin?
Do you know who I feel sorry for?
Who?
The right-wing newspaper columnists.
Right.
They have a tight deadline, which Workside Ramonas wouldn't have the first idea about. So how are they supposed to know that what they're saying is either borderline racist or offensive or ill thought through?
Well, 750 words is a lot of space to fill an hour before it's due, Colin.
These poor men have been so disadvantaged by their privileged insular backgrounds, it ain't fair. They're often too hard-working to stop and notice that what they're saying looked out of place in 1976, let alone today. It's not their fault they're old and white.
Exactly, Colin. They're victims of their own work ethic.
And the left come along and say, oh, stop and listen to the room. They can't help that their voices are so loud they drown out the room.
Nor is it their fault, Colin, that their humour is basically bullying, but with clever wordplay.
I'll say this to the offended party. If you feel so upset about it, why don't you take a prominent column in a newspaper read by millions and fight back? But oh no, they won't do that, will they?
They can't be bothered, can they, Colin? They can't be bothered.
It's easy to virtue signal and mope all day, but you try writing something designed to sell newspapers and it not be offensive. It's impossible. Anyway, thanks for having me on. Love to the family.
Love to the family, Colin. Love to the family.
Game of Thrones, you snowflakes. What's wrong with dragons and tits?
Game of Thrones. Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, I just want to show you this clip where Maxine, a nurses associate on the picket line, was explaining why she and her colleagues are on strike today, with solidarity to them. Let me bring this up.
How are you feeling? This is the second time you've been out. I know it was a day off for you last week, but you're here. How's it feeling to you, this strike action? Do you think you're making progress?
I think we've had an overwhelming amount of public support. You can see how many people are out today and were out last week, and we appreciate that a lot. Because it's a very difficult decision that we've had to make to come out. I don't want to be out here. I want to be in there looking after my patients. But unfortunately, we can't continue in nursing with the situation as it is because the conditions are just too poor and it's patients that are suffering.
You're telling me that your shifts are getting more difficult to cope with because you're suffering as well as not being able to give the patient care that you want to be able to give.
That's exactly right. when you're juggling such a high workload of patients, it's unsafe. You can't spend the time with them that you need. Unfortunately, things get missed, and routinely we're missing breaks, we're leaving work late, and that just adds on to the stress and anxiety of what is already a really stressful job.
Just think about it for a moment. Do you want a nurse who's stressed out looking after you? Do you want a nurse who's, burnt out providing you with medication? Or would you prefer a nurse who is able to go to bed, go home at a decent time, get a good night's sleep, and not have to worry about whether they can pay the bills or whether they can feed their family? Which would you prefer? That's what I would love to ask a Tory MP or Tory minister. Which would you prefer? A nurse who's able to be on the ball because they don't have 100 other things to be concerned about, or a nurse who's burnt out completely and at breaking point, providing you with an intravenous antibiotic? Which would you prefer? I know which I would. Tories lambasting nurses out on strike better than them just leaving their jobs. A nurse worrying about feeding her own kids ain't so much concentrated on worrying about you. They try to be, but obviously, if your concern is, will my children be fed tomorrow? That's not what they should be focusing on. Alistair, thanks so much for that super chat. Max, yup, see it with my own eyes. Shattered nurses. The response from the right and the Conservatives here is, well, it's a vocation. It's a vocation. They should be doing it for free. You hear this from fat gammons sitting in warm studios with nothing else to do, who don't really have a job. Okay, that's what you hear. Oh, well, they have it good. They have nothing to worry about. They're having a great time. If they didn't want it, why didn't they? If they didn't like doing this job, then why didn't they do something else?
And that's unfortunately part of the reason why nursing staff are leaving the profession, and also poor pay as well. That is a huge factor in why we're asking for this pay rise.
Well, the government have said that they've consistently taken the advice of the pay review bodies and that there isn't necessarily another pot that they can dip into without affecting patient care. What would be an acceptable deal that would enable you and everyone here to get back to work?
Well, I know what the RCN are asking for 19%. I think the most important thing is to just get Steve Barclay to negotiate with us.
This is the point. You have to aim high if you're negotiating. It's the same way, like if you're buying or selling something, if you're selling something, you have to aim high. If you're buying something, you aim low. And then you come to some agreement in between. I understand Brexiteers don't understand negotiations because when it came to the post-Brexit negotiations for trade deals, they just signed away everything. Isn't it interesting that when it came to negotiating with Japan or New Zealand or Australia, the government were willing to sign up to anything. But when it comes to actually paying nurses, no, we have to play hardball. Play hardball with nurses who are necessary, but not play hardball with Australia and New Zealand when it's not necessary.
And to have these talks, the government have ignored the independent pay review body 4 times already this year when it comes to pay disputes. I believe we need a substantial pay increase that we really feel in our pockets to make us feel valued and not demoralised that we currently feel. Because ultimately this is why nurses are leaving, because they're not paid enough, they're dealing with a stressful job. This is up to the Health Secretary to get around the table and negotiate with the RCN. It's what we deserve, that respect, to be in the negotiations. He
doesn't care. It's part of the plan to break them down, to get them to return to work because they can't afford to stay on strike any longer, and they will just take what they're given. But the problem is this will mean more will go on strike next year. Because you can't run a system that is being driven into the ground. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. So, another story in the news this week. Sunak Braverman reinstates Rwanda deportation goal after court ruling. So the Tories scored a bit of a victory this week, where the High Court announced that yes, the deal to send asylum seekers to Rwanda is lawful. Now, I don't know how they came to that conclusion, but it says here, Sunak Braverman has announced her intention to deliver mass deportations of people seeking asylum to Rwanda at scale and as soon as possible, after the High Court ruled that the policy was lawful. The Home Secretary brushed aside any condemnation from Labour MPs for lacking compassion, and told the Commons the government had been vindicated for its £140 million deal with the Central African country. Appearing before Parliament, she declined an invitation to put a date on the first flight, when the first flight would take place, but added, I spoke with my Rwandan counterpart, Vincent Birata, and we both confirmed our joint and steadfast resolve to deliver this partnership at scale as soon as possible. What is Rwanda getting out of this? Apart from the money. Or maybe it's just the money. It's like, yeah, keep giving us money. The British taxpayer loves to give away lots of money, don't they? You know, when it comes to the nurses' strike, we could actually pay nurses more, but we can't do that because we need to give money to Rwanda. Why? Well, to keep racists and bigots happy. But the racists and bigots are never happy. Yeah, well, we have to try. It's what the overwhelming majority... And Nigel Farage was... I'm not going to show it to you, don't worry. I'm not going to inflict Farage upon you. But Farage appeared in one of his weird angle videos today, I think it was, claiming that this isn't going to work. It's just smoke and mirrors. So the racists and bigots are not happy after all. It's what the overwhelming majority of the British people want to see happen. I'd like to see a poll on that. Her comments followed the judgment on Monday that would have major political ramifications for Rishi Sunak's government. Judges dismissed the application from asylum seekers, aid groups and border official union to stop the Conservative government from sending people seeking to claim asylum in the UK to Rwanda. But in a rebuke for the Home Office, 2 judges said the government failed to consider the circumstances of 8 individuals to try to deport under the scheme in June. The partial victory for the government does not mean flights will be able to start to take off straight away. There are expected to be further appeals, and the European Court on Human Rights injunction in the summer prevented immediate deportation until a legal process had been exhausted. This is very important to remember. It's not that the European Court of Human Rights blocked the flights. They said you can't. The legal process has not been exhausted. What if the European Court of Human Rights was upholding British law in a sense? Ironically, lawyers and NGOs claimed that the legal process could take years rather than months. Yes, but this is all it's a bit of window dressing for the Tories. Look, we have scored this victory, but notice that Sunak Braverman did not say when the flights would restart. Or start, as the case may be. The ruling comes after Rishi Sunak prioritised the deterrence of people from seeking asylum in the UK. More than 44,000 people have arrived in Britain by crossing the Channel in small boats, and several have died, including 4 last week when a boat capsized in freezing weather. This is not going to really work. If there are appeals, it's going to go on for months and years. I think they'll try and deport some people, but they may relocate a few, but I don't see it reaching the goals that they had put in place. It's understood that some of the applicants who include the Public and Commercial Services Trade Union and the charities Care for Calais and Detention Action will appeal against the judgment. One of the judges, Lord Justice Lewis, said the court has concluded that it is lawful for the government to make arrangements for relocating asylum seekers to Rwanda and for the asylum claims to be determined in Rwanda rather than in the United Kingdom. Once again, I don't see how this is legal, because what you're supposed, under UN conventions that the UK has signed up to, when people arrive in the UK and say, I want to make an asylum claim here, it has to be processed there. I'm not a judge, obviously, but I don't see how this is legal. But he added that the government must decide if there is anything about each person's particular circumstances, which means that his asylum claim should be determined in the United Kingdom, or whether there are other reasons for why he should not be relocated to Rwanda. The Home Secretary has not properly considered the circumstances of the 8 individual claimants while cases have been considered. Maybe technically, yes, you can send people to Rwanda, but they would be processed. Their UK claim would be processed in Rwanda. See, it's not very clear. So maybe they're saying, yeah, you can send people to Rwanda, but their claim for UK asylum is being processed in Rwanda, right? Well, I don't think so. This is in a sense people trafficking. The UK government is involved in people trafficking. Magic, thanks so much for that super chat. It's only legal by the text of the UK law. It is not fully legal or comparable with international law, compatible with international law. So it's something really specific to UK law, but it's not. But shouldn't UK law be in line with international law when it comes to issues like asylum? This is obviously I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know the ins and outs of this, or a judge, but it does seem sort of weird, no? Thanks, Magic. Something is off here. Under the deportation agreement, the UK would send some people to who arrive in the UK as stowaways or in boats to Rwanda, where their asylum claims would be processed. Okay. Those granted asylum would stay in Rwanda rather than returning to the UK. So they're not claiming asylum in Rwanda. They're claiming asylum in the UK. But they're processed in Rwanda, and if they're successful, they stay in Rwanda. That doesn't make any sense. Britain has paid Rwanda £140 million under a deal struck in April, but no one has yet been sent there. The UK was forced to cancel the first deportation flight at the last minute in June after the European Court of Human Rights ruled the plan carried a real risk of irreversible harm. Human rights groups say it's illegal, unworkable and inhumane to send people thousands of miles to a country they do not want to live in. They also cite Rwanda's poor human rights record, including allegations of torture and killing of government opponents. Why did they choose Rwanda and not, say, Canada? I think more people would prefer to live in Canada than in Rwanda. Maybe Canada said, "Go fuck yourself," to the Tory government. I don't know. Maybe they didn't even reach out to Canada. Thanks, Magic. Anyway, moving on, but sticking with that for a moment.
I welcome the Home Secretary's work with the Prime Minister on tackling illegal immigration and the statement last week. The statement did, however, talk about fairness, and I think she knows very well that Stoke-on-Trent feels that it hasn't been treated fairly. The Minister mentioned the fact that Scotland could take a few more asylum seekers if they're really concerned about these things. I think there are other parts of the country as well that could do the same.
So you have a Tory MP standing up in the House of Commons saying, other places are not taking their fair share of refugees. Other places are not pulling their weight. A British politician complaining about a place not taking its fair share. Has she ever been to, I don't know, Italy, Germany, France? Are these people stupid, or do they pretend to be stupid? Which is it? I once again, I asked this question. I need to put it on a frigging t-shirt or something. Are they stupid, or are they pretending to be stupid? Yes, Scotland needs to take more. You know, these refugees need to be spread around more evenly, more fairly. But we're full. Britain is full. These other countries, they're not taking their fair share. Germany, how many do they have? A dozen? What the oh my goodness.
Well, the Honourable Lady is absolutely right that there are almost as many hotels in use in Stoke-on-Trent as there are in the whole of Scotland, barring the city of Glasgow. So...
I could use the Tory argument here. The Tory argument is, well, you know, Scotland is far away. Not pretending to be stupid. If you're pretending to be stupid, you just sit there quietly. You wouldn't. You just be like looking at your phone or something. But no, she's actually this dumb, I think. David, Indie Truck David says, they're stupid. Thanks, David. These places need to take their fair share.
Be aware of the concerns of the Honourable Lady and her colleagues in Stoke-on-Trent, and I met with the leader of Stoke-on-Trent City Council last week to hear them directly. We'll do everything we can to support them.
Oh my goodness, okay, that's enough of that guy. There's another story I just want to cover in a moment, which is extremely concerning, but I want to talk a little bit about this first. There's a cost of living crisis, as we know, and one of the ways that could be, you know, one of the problems in regards to this cost of living crisis is rising rents. Many younger people in particular aren't able to afford to buy a house. They're not able to afford, in some cases, the rent on their current home, meaning that they have less money available or no money available to put aside to eventually buy a home. And well, builders now are saying that it's actually getting more expensive to build homes, which is even more bad news.
The building blocks of the economy are crumbling. High material costs, staff shortages and weak demand are weighing on construction companies. They are going bust at their fastest rate in a decade. And the scale of the downturn has taken the owner of this bricklaying company by surprise.
I've got a family to look after, which is my priority, but I also have other guys working for me who rely on the work and also have families, mortgages. Yeah, it's a little bit of a worry.
How much of your costs gone up?
A lot. Yeah, a hell of a lot actually. I mean, materials have gone up between 10 and 50%. Obviously, inflation has gone up, so the guys that are working for me want extra money. It can't carry on the way it's going. I can't charge that much more. I can't keep up with inflation.
Small and medium-sized businesses are the bedrock of the economy, but they are less equipped to deal with sharply rising costs and falling consumer demand. Small house builders like this one in Preston fear they may be a dying breed.
We employ, as small to medium-sized developers, a lot of people within the construction industry and the wider economy. We, as a construction industry, we employ about 1 million people. So the ripple effect of anything that happens to our industry is quite significant throughout the wider economy.
They are collapsing at their fastest rate in a decade. Construction companies account for a fifth of this. Insolvencies in the sector are at their highest level since 2012, with 2,094 insolvencies in the first half of this year.
Everything from timber to steel has shot up in price, and these extra costs, they're not easy to pass on to customers who are grappling with similar issues of their own. And it's the construction sector with its wafer-thin margins that's driving this increase. A clear sign as any that Britain is in recession.
At a moment when people need homes, at a moment when the cost of living is driving people out of being able to buy their own home into renting, which means that they have, as I said, less and less money available to put aside for a deposit to get their home.
High inflation and a slowing economy. It's a toxic mix. that is destroying businesses and jobs, leaving everyone with less money to spend.
The solution here is for the government to intervene and provide incentives for the industry, to provide grants for people to buy their first home, to get out of renting. But at the moment, the Tories are not interested in that. And there's also the NIMBYism, of course, the not in my backyard. So if you want to build social housing, which is desperately needed, many Tory MPs understand that, well, if we have, social housing in the area, or the people who vote for us will not be very happy because they feel that it's going to lower the price of their homes. And they'll vote for another party. They'll vote for whoever will be against that. David, thanks so much for that super chat, David McGuinness. Indie Truck Davey says it has says it's worth a $5 to make you laugh. Thanks for that. Very kind of you. And follow Indie Truck Davey on YouTube and on Facebook. So I definitely have to give you a shout out for that, for making me laugh there. So check out Indie Truck Davies channel and the Two Davies, which is a great channel on YouTube as well. The English want their country back, stand up to the media. And yet in all this, some people still believe it has nothing to do with the Tories. We still live in the thin end of the wedge with respect to the hiking cost of living. Wait until all these energy prices get added to the cost of products, businesses, rail, transport, pubs, etc. Yes. Plug the tax haven loopholes and tax the rich. That'd be a start. Yes, that would bring in a huge amount of money. The non-dom status would bring in about 9 billion. But they don't want to touch that. I think it's about 9 billion. There's also, taxing the richest in society. People who don't need the money. They don't need the money. You can tax them. The windfall tax was supposed to bring in money, but it doesn't work because there's a loophole that allows the companies to say, well, we're going to invest in new resources and new... we're going to we're going to invest in research and development, then we don't have to pay the windfall tax. Yay! So all they have to do is say, yeah, we're going to do something that we're planning to do anyway and avoid the tax. 3.2 billion, I think. No, it's Ukraine's fault. It was the pandemic before. Now it's Ukraine. What will it be next year? On the pandemic... This is extremely worrying. This is a clip from the BBC yesterday, I think it was. Not from Sky News, sorry.
Even first thing in the morning, the crematoriums were burning. This one in East Beijing is reportedly just for COVID-related deaths, and it was busy. Ambulances arriving, cars carrying coffins lined up to go in. At another site across the city, families gathered to mourn and remember. White is traditionally worn at Chinese funerals. A massive COVID wave is sweeping this city, but officially, almost no one has died. But while numbers can be obscured, grieving relatives cannot. This party didn't want to be identified, but they did want to talk. They know COVID is killing people. It's the reason they're here.
我不太相信政府的这个报道。I don't believe. 73，也是他没有什么太多的基础病，就刚开始他可能没有认为这么严重，所以他没有去医院。等到后来他就失去意识了，然后再送到医院，当天就去世了。就是我们也没想到会这么容易就死人的。
Round the corner, more evidence of pressure on this system. A long queue of vans acting as hearses. Tension in the air too. Some workers said they've been waiting here for more than 3 hours.
Drivers we've spoken to in this queue say that things are much busier than normal. It's impossible to say how many people are dying, but it seems it's more than normal. Hello. I'm sorry.
It didn't take long for authorities to intervene. As we walked away, one man tried to grab our camera.
Okay, we'll give you the press card then.
Such is the sensitivity of what's happening here. And it was similar at nearly every site we visited. A heavy police presence or a heavy effort to obstruct. But there's clearly real pressure on this system. China's hospitals are under-resourced and there are not enough intensive care beds. At this fever hospital, we saw what appeared to be a body, wheeled out, covered only in a quilt. We can't know for sure what happened, but it didn't bode well for what's going on inside. The zero COVID policy was dropped so abruptly here, many say China was simply not prepared. Beijing may well cope better than smaller, rural towns. It just isn't clear how bad things are. It is clear they'll likely get worse.
Okay, this is worrying because you have the zero COVID policy that was in place for some time in China, and then they ended it. There was public pressure to end it. We saw the protests, we saw rioting taking place where people were at breaking point. So the government decided to end it pretty quickly. And then obviously cases started to rise dramatically. And there's a huge problem in China is that the vaccine that they use is not similar to, is believed not to be as powerful as the Moderna or the AstraZeneca one used in the West. And then there was also the concern that many elderly people were not vaccinated, which was a real concern as well. And this is part of the reason why cases are rising so quickly, and hospitals are being overwhelmed in China. Are there nurses striking? Not yet. But I imagine if they're pushed to, I don't think they're allowed to strike. If they go on strike, they'd be put in prison. I just want to cover one final thing before we finish for tonight. This is
what do you want me to say?
Maybe a positive story about the cost of living, how people are working together. Covered something like this before on another stream.
So I say, look, this is the start of a trip around England and Wales, in the middle of this in the middle of this very deep, increasingly deep social crisis. So it's that sort of stuff. You want some of that? Yeah. We'll make it sound conversational. Yeah. All right.
It's clothes, it's bills, it's food.
This has been going on for too long. We're in poverty. What are you going to do about it?
There's more good than bad in this village, believe it or not. But that's not what you want to hear, is it? I think you'd rather go and print bad news than good news.
Do you know what? We have come to tell hopeful stories about amazing people doing amazing things to sort of hold their communities together.
We're a team, aren't we? Well, don't we?
No one's going to help us, so we need to get off our backsides and do it ourselves.
We offer food covered essential parcels. The lights have gone off. They're all on sensors because of the cost of living crisis. There we go.
It's a very slick operation. It doesn't look like it looks crazy in here, but I promise you it is. We're right in one of the most deprived areas of London. They've had tough 2-3 years. There's no let up. No
One
let
damn
up.
thing after another.
Mm-hmm. When we started, we had 13 families in a week. Now we're getting 1,300 families a week.
1,300 a week.
100-fold increase.
From 9th of April 2020 to this week.
Why are we not seeing this? Why is there no talk of this in the media generally? This is from, I think it's from today. So 10 hours ago this video was uploaded from The Guardian. Why is this not front page news? The idea that there are people queuing round the block to get access to food banks, to get access to food for their families. Why is there talk of Meghan Markle instead? Or why is there talk about, the football? Why are these the priorities and not what's actually happening?
You feel you're being sort of cared for, that people are looking out for you?
Yep. And I'm meeting friends, so
Yeah, so it has a sort of social element to it as well.
Yeah.
And if this wasn't here?
I don't know, I'd definitely be suffering, you know, yeah. Picking up things, I don't know, from the street or asking from, things are hard.
Right in the middle of probably one of the wealthiest cities in the world, right? The people who need the most basic help.
You know what really triggered my mind is I saw images like this back in the mid-2010s in the United States, where I remember there were homeless people being brought food parcels and stuff like this. And I saw also a really worrying trend there as well, was there were doctors going to provide free treatment to people because they couldn't afford medical bills. Now the Tories, of course, want to privatise the NHS. Maybe that's what they also want, is where the poorest in society will go not to a food bank or a warm bank, but they go to a medical bank because they won't be able to afford treatment. Look, Squirrel Max, distraction, yes. It's Meghan Markle and stuff like this is a distraction. The football is a distraction. You know, bread and circuses without the bread, unfortunately.
We're a food hub, not a food bank. So we're giving out clothes now at the moment, nappies, babies items.
We've kind of become much more of a kind of wraparound service. Job search, for example. We have somebody who comes to help with debt management. But the glue that holds it all together, if you like, the starting point is everybody needs food first.
There's many people that will come back and they will say, you've made an impact on my life, and I can go home and I can eat and make food, or I can feed my baby. I've got the items I need to carry on going. So government, what are you going to do to improve this? What are you going to do to improve people's health, well-being, and people do not have to resort to this?
Well said. What are the government going to do? They're going to do nothing. It requires people standing up. It requires people rolling up their sleeves. It requires people shouting. It requires people putting pressure on their MPs. I said before, 100 letters to an MP is more powerful than 100,000 people marching in the street. That's unfortunately the way the system works. I hope what's going to happen at the next election is that the Tories are removed from power and the new government will look after people, will begin the healing, will begin the change that's necessary. I hope they win a massive majority where they don't have to continually look over their shoulder worrying, do we have to worry about these, the Tories coming back into power, the Tories undermining us, the media, the right-wing media undermining us. They need to push ahead, and I hope that they do that. I hope Starmer is the man, is the one who's going to change things, turn things around. Maybe I'm being naive, but I hope, I'm hopeful that that's what's going to happen. We're almost at the end of the stream, so guys, I want to finish on a happy note. Of course, we have our one for the road. So I want to say thank you so much to everyone who came on tonight. Thank you so much for your super chats. I greatly appreciate it. Thanks to everyone who came on. Thanks to the moderators for doing a wonderful job. Remember, you can support the channel by becoming a patron, or you can, if these difficult times, sharing videos on social media, liking, subscribing if you're not already a subscriber. Liking the videos, sharing them on social media is a great way to support the channel as well. Before we finish, we have our one for the road, of course, and if I don't see you on our Sunday roast, which I'm not sure when it's coming out, but if I don't see you then, I will see you on Friday, same bad time, same bad channel, just before Christmas. I'll pop on then, the 23rd, so there's still a few moments left. Maybe I'll do something special for Friday. If I don't see you between now and then, have a great week, and we finish with our one for the road.
Hello, Minister here, doesn't matter what for. So 2022 has been a bit of a roller coaster ride, hasn't it? I mean, it's been a tough time for all of us. I've had to learn the names of at least 3 different Prime Ministers and 5 different Chancellors for a start. It's not easy. Turns out being a minister not so much fun when you keep changing departments all the time. I can't even remember what I'm meant to be in charge of now. I hope it's not trains. As we all slide into a cold winter, you might be struggling to think of an appropriate gift for a friend or loved one, or enemy or hated one. Chocolates? Too cliched. A book? Who has time to read these days? A signed photo of Boris Johnson? You simply can't afford it. Instead, why not order them a funny video message from yours truly to send them into the new year with a spring in their step and hope in their heart? Hope and spring not guaranteed. Of course, I don't normally make video messages for just anybody, but, well, I've seen the polls, and although I'm in a rather safe seat, I think I might need to make other plans. Build up my reserves, if you know what I mean. Plus, most of my Russian donations have dried up for some reason, so here we are. Just send me some information about the recipient, and I'll send them a lovely Christmas greeting. And I might even roast them a bit, like a Christmas turkey, or whatever protein you can get your hands on these days in the aftermath of bird flu and Brexit. So, click the link above, or below, or to the side, I don't really know how this works, and get ordering. See you there.
Do support Matt Green's channel as well. He's on social media, all the social medias, in particular on YouTube, really good. So guys, I'll see you on... Oh, we have a super chat from Peter. Thank you so much, Peter. Is there any charities we can donate to? I always say local. Try and keep it local, because it's probably maybe there are people you know. So I say for Christmas, if you can avoid buying useless presents, maybe give a donation to your local food bank or a local charity in your area that's desperate at this moment. I definitely say something about it. If it's for the Sunday roast, we'll mention something about that in the video. Otherwise, do try and give something to your local charity. They're probably struggling at the moment. And if you can't afford to give something, try and volunteer as well. That they're always looking for people who can drive or to organize, to collect materials for a food bank or for a warm bank or whatever. They're always desperate for volunteers, especially this time of year. So guys, have a great week. Thanks so much once again for the super chats, and I'll see you on Friday. Take care. Good night.